Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting. Whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or by connecting through our Facebook page. Light and music are the vibrations most often referenced by those who've experienced an NDE. And likewise, those who've experienced distressing NDEs often speak of an absence of light, of being cut off from the light. Some scientists have said they hear echoes of the Word of God when they detect the background vibrations at the outer edge of the Big Bang universe. But these references to heavenly light and sound are not new. They go back to the roots of faith and the spiritual insights of many religions. Our guest today is James Bean, a comparative religion scholar and a book reviewer, author, public speaker, broadcaster with a broad familiarity with global religions and spiritual traditions. He's been involved with public radio, Radio for Peace International, the community radio movement, Wisdom Radio, and is an independent producer currently creating programs for several stations. James also is a scholar and practitioner of Surat Shabda Yoga, an ancient form of meditation from India. And this form of meditation is about the union of the soul with the inner light and sound of God. James, welcome to NDE Radio.
Hey, how's it going?
Well, on to the subject. Christians describe Jesus as light from light. And I know one of your favorite Western texts is the Gospel of Thomas, where Jesus says we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself. And there are many other religious references sacred to sacred light as well. And so I'm hoping you'll give us a brief overview of light as a description of God and heaven and what people see when they have an NDE.
Yes, the divine light or visions of light, or the light motif, turns up everywhere in all of the world religions and mystical writings, including Christian mystics and the New Testament itself and Gnostic Gospels. And people that tend to have had a near-death experience or are mystically inclined and meditate, such as myself, although I also had a kind of near-death experience a long time ago, folks like us tend to notice, these passages and go, see, light. If your eye is single, your whole body will be filled with light. Yes, and we notice these passages. But for people who are non-experiencers, they see those as just metaphor for, I intellectually understand something, or something like that. And they don't really see that dimension. So we basically, and this is kind of a spiritual principle, whatever level we're at, we tend to see through those spectacles, and our level of understanding, what we notice in scriptures or what we're attracted to, will tend to match our current state of consciousness, if you will. And so for the mystically inclined, we see all of these references to divine light in the world scriptures and go, hey, that's like a near-death experience, or St. Paul got caught up to the third heaven. Hey there, had an out-of-body experience. So these references are everywhere. And it basically is it just communicates that human beings, while alive, can tune into something of the heavens. For those who have the eyes to see, it is possible, basically through sensory deprivation type techniques, prayer, meditation, being in a cave for a very long time, just some sort of way to transcend our normal waking state of consciousness and five sense perception, to step out of that for a minute, be still and know that I am God, to quote the book of Psalms. If we can just enter that stillness, it is possible for human beings to see divine light in the Hindu Upanishads. It describes firefly-like lights and sparkles and stars, and there are many references to divine light in all of these religions. But it's not necessarily something that most people would would experience or would have encountered. So it all seems probably pretty strange to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there. It's like infrared or ultraviolet light or radio waves. If you have the right kind of receiver, you can tune in other frequencies.
Well, I noticed in an article you wrote for Inner Tapestry that you refer to these fireflies, stars, various colors, and other visions of light that people can have through meditating. So how far can you go with meditation? What's your personal experience with that? And also, what are the mystics' reports about that sort of thing?
Meditation, and that word goes by other terms in different traditions. I like the Syriac, Eastern Christian tradition of Mesopotamia. They use the term pure prayer. Others might call it contemplation or the silence, just entering into the silence. People have historically gone quite far. There are a few mystics that I think have pretty much gone as far as one can go, even further than many near-death experiencers. But typically, meditators don't get to that point. We sort of dip our toe into the great beyond through meditation. So it's a more gradual approach than a near-death experience where your car is wrapped around a telephone pole and you're flung out of your body and get there in a hurry.
Yes.
But you can, through meditation, tune into those same realms. In fact, when I was very young, since this is a program about near-death experiences, when I was about 19, I've always been a person of faith and prayer and solitude. And one day I was so caught up in prayer and chant, what I now would call meditation, for hours, and I actually entered into that realm that I would now call a near-death experience. I was caught, I was outside of my body in a realm that is pure love, absolute love. And there was a being that was in front of me, I noticed, and I don't really have an opinion as to what kind of being. It was a pure being of love and light. But it didn't look like Jesus. It didn't look like an angel. I don't have a label for the being as such, other than it was very tall, and I couldn't make out the face. And since then, I've read a bunch of near-death books, and that has come up with other people, that they couldn't see the face of the heavenly being. So there are a few other people that have reported that particular aspect. And it was just this blissful encounter, just in this pure realm of love. And I remember telepathically exchanging a few words, if you will, with this heavenly being. And at the time, I said, basically, I'm just paraphrasing myself. This is awesome. I want to do this every day. I just want to come back again and again. But the telepathic reply was like, no, you won't be experiencing this for a while. And I kind of thought, nah, come on, we can do this. But the being was right. But it was just this incredible baptism of love, if you will, where love is like thick, an atmosphere of love like the ocean, and one doesn't realize there is that much love that exists.
I had the similar experience when I was as a chaplain attending a death, and it was very unusual because I've been at many deaths, but this time the room almost was like a golden honey that you couldn't really perceive it as visually as gold, but it just felt that way. And I think it had a lot to do with God's love for this particular person, or this particular person's love for God. Powerful presence of and honey is about the only analogy I can think of to explain what the atmosphere in the room felt like.
Yes, yeah, that there can be that, in addition to a component of light or sound, a sense of awe, wonder, pure love, a kind of bliss, or what in India would be, the word is ananda, just pure heavenly bliss. You're blissed. You're blessed.
It's interesting to think of, we talk about light and love as, there's a alliteration there, but, and the words are used almost interchangeably in poetry, but people don't generally think of love as a physical manifestation the way they do light. And yet there seems to be some sort of physical nature to love.
Yeah, it's certainly a perception that people feel, and I like that language of Brother Lawrence of the Resurrection, practicing the presence of God, because that term presence, that I think that, for me, that's a word that describes it.
Mm. What do some of the other religions, how do they interpret love and light?
Well, Rumi poetry certainly does that just about better than anything else, except for Kabir poetry. Kabir is my favorite poet, but Rumi, and many are drawn to Rumi poetry in the Western world, and they may not exactly know why, because they're just drawn to his loving presence and radiance, and they're encountering a Sufi mystic, and for many people, that's probably the first time they've ever encountered someone like that, who is a mystically inclined person. So they're just drawn to Rumi poetry because Rumi represents this interesting way of looking at the cosmos that is very much about experiencing God in this life. And so, people are drawn to Rumi like moths to the flame, perhaps for that reason. He's kind of a connection. And for others, it might be Kabbalah or Gnosticism or Sant-Mad or some other school of mystics where these secrets get shared with people openly without any fear of prosecution or persecution, where this sort of thing is accepted and encouraged, in fact.
I think I heard maybe on one of your radio shows that when you were interviewing Barks, perhaps, that Rumi is the best-selling poet in this country.
Yeah.
Is that still true?
That's still true. Yeah, I looked into that, and not just even in a specialty category like spiritual poetry, but just poetry as a category. They say that Rumi is the most widely read poet, and he's certainly quoted a lot on the internet. I can personally say that I've seen, tens of thousands of Rumi quotes online, so he is definitely very popular. Rumi presents God as the beloved. Sometimes he calls God the friend or a companion, but the common Sufi term for God is the beloved. And so it is a divine romance that is his model, as opposed to other models of a frightening God, so you're guilty and you want to alleviate guilt. For Rumi, God is a love affair, so he's far beyond guilt and just trying to squeak by with minimum participation. It's a divine romance if you read Rumi. So it's a bit like Odes of Solomon or Psalms of Solomon or the Psalms, God as companion, God as friend, God as beloved, object of one's love. And that's also quite universal with the mystics. So the more love, the more God, and the more experience of heaven. So all of those things, I think, are intertwined.
There's a lot of popular music I've found. If you just took the name of the woman out or the man and put in God, would work just as well as any gospel song in terms of talking about love and relationship.
Yeah, that's very true. And Deepak Chopra did the opposite. He put out a book of his own paraphrases of Rumi poetry and turned it into sort of an erotic love poetry. So he went in the opposite direction with that.
Leonard Cohen does that with his music a lot, too. He had a lot of interplay between the hedonistic and the sensual and the spiritual.
Yep, that theme, Kabir poetry, Eastern poet mystics, especially the Sufis, the Urdu poetry of Pakistan and Central Asia, India, they're all very much in that tradition of the lover and the beloved. And it also turns up in the Western world, too. John of the Cross, I put him in that category of having a religion that's cultivating lovers of the beloved. John of the Cross, Teresa of Avila, some of those medieval saints, had that same approach. And some of them even met Sufis in Spain, so maybe there's even a direct connection there.
Right. Well, Spain was a great crossroads for those cultural exchanges.
Right. Something was going on with them. You have all these amazing medieval mystics and very
I think a lot of
Sufi-like.
that was facilitated as well by the Templars and their first their experiences in the Middle East and Jerusalem, and then later on they had trade routes with Turkey and the East, and I think a lot of ideas crossed back and forth as well.
Oh yes, everyone loved books, and we're swapping books in Turkey and Christians, and Jewish, and Sufis. Quite often enjoyed the same books, and were into mystical books and shared ideas. And so, the beloved. For me, I like terms like for God. I like the term Anurag Sagar, which is from India, which means ocean of love. I like that term ocean of love as a description of God, and it kind of resonates with my own personal experience. And seems to turn up again and again in different cultures. And in Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism is that theme of the beloved as well.
You put together quotes from Jesus in a Sermon on the Light, which I really like.
The Sermon on the Light.
You don't happen to have that with you, do you?
I do. I have it right in front of me, as a matter of fact.
Would you like to read some of it?
I could. Yeah.
First, explain what it is, and then read some of it for us.
Yeah, I put together all of these sayings of Jesus taken from the New Testament, Gospel of Thomas, Pistis Sophia, which is another Gnostic book, and some other things from Egypt, and put them all together. And noticed that they all fit together really well, and it seemed more like a Sermon on the Light, which is how we would imagine Jesus would speak. It wouldn't be a case of someone standing up in the crowd saying, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Thank you very much, everyone. See you next Sunday." It would be a discourse of some sort. And that's what this feels like. And since these are all real passages, it just makes perfect sense to see what happens when you read this and what your reaction is. So I just call this the Sermon on the Light. Trust in me. Look to the living one while you are alive, lest you die and seek to see him and be unable to see. Understand what the great light is. I am the light that is over all things. I am all. From me all came forth, and to me all attained. Split a piece of wood, I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. I am the light of the world. Anyone who follows me will not be walking in the dark, but will have the light of life. Walk while you have the light, so darkness won't overpower you. Those who walk in the dark don't know where they're going. Since you have the light, believe in the light, and you will become children of the light. I will give you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no hand has felt, and what has never occurred to the human mind. And I'm going to fast forward a bit. If your eye be single, your whole body shall be full of light. When I have gone to the light, preach to all of the world and say to them, do not cease seeking day or night, and do not let yourselves relax until you find the mysteries of the kingdom of light, which will purify you and make you into pure light and lead you into the kingdom of the light. So I just find all of these sayings to go together really well.
Mm-hmm.
And it is coming from that esoteric tradition. The light motif, as I've understood it and studied it in these texts, including the Christian and even Eastern Orthodox mystical traditions, their goal is to, while alive during this lifetime, see divine light or visions of light in their time of prayer or contemplation. It's kind of a secretive thing because no one wants to brag about where they're at and, turn it into a very carnal and ego-inflated sort of thing. So it's kept a secret. on Mount Athos in Greece, and in Christian monasteries and in other traditions too. They don't really. This is sort of like the secret teachings that no one talks about, because it's sort of far out sounding. Like you can have visions of heaven, and they'll come and lock you away. Or there was a time when they would lock you away for such talk. And two, it's a way to get persecuted, and the Roman legions will come, and bad things will happen, and your funding will be cut off, and so there are real good reasons to kind of keep the secret teachings kind of under one's hat, as it were. But this is very much the goal of so many mystics. Is it Simeon, the new theologian, who's actually an Eastern Orthodox saint, pretty much recognized by everyone, even the Catholic Church, who said that true Christians are those who see the light of the Holy Trinity. That was his language for it. So that's his definition of a Christian, to see the light, literally. And in the monasteries and the contemplative tradition, east to west, that is one of the goals, is to actually behold divine light. It's seen as a way to cleanse your soul, to use in Eastern terminology, lower your karma, get rid of some of your karma, or lighten the load, as it were. And so their goal is to see as much of heaven as possible during this life through meditation, and people become, they know the way back to that level again, so that in the next world they can continue their journey. You're tethered to the light during life, and so you'll go to the light in the beyond. That's one of their goals. I think that's almost a paraphrase from a saying in the Gospel of Philip, find the light now and you'll continue on with the light later.
Right. Now, St. John on the Cross talked about the dark night of the soul and going through darkness to get to light. And one of the things that gets reported from time to time in a near-death experience is that people have that experience as well, and sometimes they're terrified by it. Sometimes they just have the dark experience, and then by the time they might be getting to the light, they suddenly find themselves back in their own bodies. But
right,
there are spiritual traditions that speak of a dark place that you journey through as well, aren't there?
Right, and in the path that I follow, which is Saint Mat, they have these heavens mapped out, and there are dark voids, dark crooked tunnels. And there's something called Mahasun, which is the great void. And so you'll be seeing lights or visions of light go through a whirlpool cave vortex, and then you'll come to this place of pure darkness. And you want to get through that and onto very bright light, on the other side. And so, yes, even in the heavens, for people that have had visions of light, you still may encounter a layer of darkness. It's kind of like astronomy. I think astronomy and mysticism go together so well.
We had a movie come out called Gravity, which I would recommend to people because it gives you that feeling of being lost in the darkness. Of course, you can see the earth and the stars and the sun and so forth, but the vastness of that darkness and you're being lost and out of control floating through it is a powerful image for a distressing NDE as well.
Right. Yes. Yep. For the person of faith. Yep. There's God with you in the darkness, but yes, by yourself as a little tiny dot in a big giant cosmos can seem pretty lonely.
Very lonely, and I think loneliness is probably loneliness is more the opposite of light than darkness. But maybe the two are just as parallel as light and love. Darkness and loneliness are parallel as well.
Yeah, darkness, loneliness, or separation, just isolation. I
had a woman send me a description of a dream she had, which was very much like a near-death experience, and I read part of it on the show a week or two ago. But she described being in this place that was created by light. She picks a flower and then thinks, oh, now this flower is going to die. But she realizes that the flower and everything that she sees in this spiritual garden is the product of light. And all she does is places the flower back down on the ground, and it's back attached to the source again.
Right. Yes, I've seen some of those myself, and mystics. In India, the symbol of the lotus. Lotuses are used in the poetry of some mystics to describe heavenly flowers, and in other realms, astral gardens, if you will.
Tell my audience a little about the shows that you do.
If they just go to my website, spiritualawakeningradio.com, there'll be links to articles, blogs, and you can spend the rest of your life there. I believe in websites that have links that just go on forever, almost eternally, where you can read blogs and listen to shows, read articles.
Where do you think people should, if somebody came to you and said, I want to know more about the light, how should they apply their time? To reading, to meditation, to, some people turn to drugs? What would your advice be?
My advice is to send me an email, and not just me, but just someone who is on a spiritual path that deals with light, to talk to that living person, because you can get lost in a book. You may get some things but not other things. And so a living person, whoever it is, who's into this, they will be able to talk, guide, direct, and they'll be much more alive than a book. Books are good too. I've got lots of books in my house, but there's just a connection with other people on the path of light will, I think, make it a faster journey, an easier journey.
Someone should have a teacher, in other words, or at least
a teacher or someone who knows a teacher. Sort. Yeah, I know teachers, and so I could easily direct someone. I think that personal connection probably is more significant than anything else. Just someone who, whether they're a teacher or they just are friends with a teacher who knows a teacher and who's familiar with the practice, will be able to direct someone.
Many NDE reports, even going back to Plato's story of speak of the sounds of heaven. Right? I think describes columns of light in which angels stand singing different tones. And you've done a wonderful paper on the sounds of the world religions, inner and outer sound of the world's religions, which I just finished reading. It's quite massive.
8,000 words or so.
Full of the most wonderful quotes from different traditions about music and sound and the spiritual. So maybe we should talk about that. You mentioned in the beginning of your article, and the sound of God's voice said, "Let there be." And in the beginning was the Word, the Logos, the Tao, the Shabda, the Nada, etc., etc. Right. So we could begin with that, with the voice of God.
Yes, all of the creation accounts have sound at the beginning. In Hinduism, the Om, A-U-M, or sometimes spelled Om as an Om chant. And let there be in the Quran, and all became, and God said, let there be light, and then there was light. And so a voice of God doing the creating, that is, of course, sound, the voice of God. And in most every religion, it's the very same thing. And, of course, I've taken note in recent years, the superstring theory, M theory, the idea of, especially Michio Kaku's way of describing a superstring that vibrates the multiverse into existence, and I kind of take note of that as being perhaps another form of creation story with vibration as the basis for existence.
Right. Well, you mentioned also the Australian Aborigines song lines, which is, I guess, sang the world into existence, but also keeps it and maintains it.
Right. Yes, and that's true of in the East. Those who practice inner sound meditation, they see it as a continuing sound. The sound continues even as the sound of the Big Bang is still echoing. The static between stations on FM, that hissing static, scientists say it represents the background radiation of the cosmos, the leftover echo of the Big Bang, if you will. Mm-hmm. And in the mystical traditions that focus on sound, the belief is that the sound is still reverberating. The sound is more like the Ganges, more like a river that is continuing to flow. And in fact, the soul, it's kind of a royal highway for the soul, if you will. We're all sort of connected by way of the sound. So for them, sound and spirit or Holy Spirit or part of God, that is within every living thing. Those are all interchangeable terms, really, sound and spirit.
Mm-hmm. You also mentioned the Book of the Hopi, and quote, all the vibratory centers along the Earth's axis from pole to pole resounded his call. The earth trembled, the universe quivered in tune. Thus he made the whole world an instrument of sound and an instrument for carrying messages, resounding praise to the creator of all. I love that.
Yeah, that's an amazing book. The Book of the Hopi, and that, of course, is one of the oldest tribes with an intact Native American culture on the North American continent. And there, too, in their wonderful version of Genesis, the Creator sings the song of creation, and these clay-like figures come to life, the Adam and Eve, quote-unquote, if you will, come to life as a result of this sound of creation. And, of course, anyone who's familiar with Shabd Yoga or Nada Yoga from India, they go, aha, this is like another way of saying that we're made alive by this divine sound going on in the cosmos.
Right. The breath of life that God breathed into us no doubt had a vibration connected with it. I think of it as an auditory vibration as well as a breath vibration.
Absolutely. And those Sufi poets like Rumi that talk about the breath of God, blowing through the reed flute, making sound. And so the human body is like the reed, and the breath flowing through it is God. And thus there is sound produced.
I also noted, as I got into your article, the sound of silence, and I thought that had originated with Simon and Garfunkel's song, but apparently it goes much further back than that.
Yeah, I really enjoy the Buddhist take on, meditation in general and sound meditation to it, because it's coming from a very experiential, sitting on one's meditation cushion perspective. Mm-hmm. In fact, I picked out this paragraph to read because I think it illustrates how people hear sound, and this is on the sound of silence. Ajahn Sumedho is a Buddhist teacher in Theravadan Buddhism and has a book called The Sound of Silence. And this paragraph for me has always pretty much framed the whole concept of hearing sound. He says, as you calm down, you can experience the sound of silence in the mind. You hear it as a kind of high-frequency sound, a ringing sound that's always there. It's just normally never noticed. Now, when you begin to hear that sound of silence, it's a sign of emptiness, of silence of the mind. It is something you can always turn to. As you concentrate on it, turn to it. It can make you quite peaceful and blissful. Meditating on that, you have a way of letting the conditions of the mind cease without suppressing them with another condition. I just love that paragraph. There's this ringing sound going on. Mm-hmm. It's always there. Most people don't notice it because traffic noises and just all of the sounds of life kind of clutter it out. But it's there. If we just abide in the silence long enough, we might be able to hear it.
Right. Well, in my job as a palliative care chaplain at Eastern Maine Medical, I often tell people who have a relative who is perhaps dying but in a coma or asleep that they can hear, and hearing seems to be the last sense of ours that continues.
Right.
And it seems to me that it may be that that's because we are built to be listening at the point of death, that we're looking for that sound.
I've heard it said that, the physical sense of hearing is the last sense to go. That is very true. And in the near-death experiences, for many years, I have read accounts of people hearing beautiful heavenly music, and it pretty much is across the spectrum. Even on the 700 Club, some evangelical near-death book talks about the notes between the keys, or in other words, the heavenly music is much more sophisticated than earthly music, and so there are many, many more notes, and it's just amazingly beautiful. And that is one of the. It's not quite as common as light or visions, but quite frequently there are accounts of people experiencing beautiful music, heavenly music, angelic music, as part of their near-death experience.
I'm always glad when the Christian channels pick up on some aspect of the near-death experience, and it reminded me of that when I came on this quote that you, in your article, "What else is Christ but the sound of God?" which comes from the Acts of John.
Yeah, this book called the Acts of John, I collect those apocryphal writings and include those too. That's kind of one unique thing about my stuff, in addition to Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, Quran, and so on. I also include those apocryphal Western books, some of those Gnostic Gospels.
Right, and no doubt many of those writings were inspired by people who've had mystical or near-death-like experiences in their lives, and then are compelled to sit down and write about it.
Yes, I have seen there's the Mandaean scriptures of Iraq. They're sort of a John the Baptist type sect from ancient times. Very old group. They speak Aramaic, a dialect of Aramaic. I have read in their scriptures accounts that sound like ancient NDEs, ancient near-death experiences, crossing over to the other side and having an escort, a guide that comes to meet the soul after it has passed on. And it sounds a lot like Life After Life by Raymond Moody. Right.
Or perhaps Dante's travels through, the Inferno to Paradise.
Absolutely. Some of those mystics were kind of delving into the same realm.
You mentioned Richard Rowley, and this quote, "When Christ wishes it, he receives within himself the song sent into him from the heavens, and his meditation is changed into melody, and his spirit lingers in marvelous harmony." And I think that's available to us as well.
Absolutely, everyone. The sound is within everyone, every living thing. And it's just a matter of meditating to hear it, and that's where, of course, some have a tough time, because we're so used to either being in the body or in our mind, in our thoughts, and we don't really switch off either of those. We don't, turn the lights out and sit in the dark and, and just focus on the silence and the darkness. We always like to be seeing or doing something or thinking about something. So we kind of are in a place where it's hard to find the off button, if you will, for our regular state of consciousness in order to delve into that other realm. But if we do, we start to explore this inner landscape that's within everyone, and start encountering the inner lights and inner sounds. And so it's like the unexplored rooms of the house. The house within.
We have to shut down that busy brain of ours, and in order to hear our spiritual side.
Yeah, if we can do that and abide in the silence, and I think for most people find it hard to meditate, but it's because they haven't really tried before. And after you keep at it, it becomes routine. But at first, like anything else, it requires a little bit of effort, and then it's not difficult, really. But at first, when people first try and meditate, they hear their thoughts really loud and find it hard to settle down, and probably had, espresso before they sat down to try and meditate, and have a lot of caffeine flowing through their system. But you get all past that if you keep at it. Effort, practice makes perfect.
Exactly. Well, when I started the show, I asked a question about what's the sound like in heaven, and Richard Roll has a wonderful quote about that, too, from your paper. In the light of God, which is called the kingdom of heaven, the sound is wholly soft, pleasant, lovely, pure, and thin. God, who is a spirit, has by and through his manifestation introduced himself into distinct spirits, which are the voices of his eternal pregnant harmony in the manifested word of his great kingdom of joy. They are God's instrument in which his spirit melodizes in the kingdom of joy. They are angels, the flames of fire and light in a living, understanding dominion. Wow. I love that description, and I think I can see that in reports that we've had from NDErs.
Yes, and he says that all the music of the earth, all the greatest classical composers and the greatest of instruments, that's all like barking dogs in comparison to the great divine sound. And I've always found that to be kind of a funny way. It really drives home the point really well.
Well, and also somewhere in your paper as well, you mentioned that the sitar was supposed to emulate the music of the spheres or of the other side, and yet the man who tried to do that felt that it was a failure.
Right, a glorious failure.
Yeah. We had I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but we had someone inquire at IANDS about people who had heard music in their near-death experience, and would they get in touch with this person who was trying to write music that would emulate that experience, and she wanted to bounce it off people who had actually heard the other side.
Right, and there are sacred music styles and world music instruments that do imitate to some degree the divine sound. Tibetan bowls and bells and gongs, those singing bowls, do that really well. Some forms of chant, like the Gyoto monks. I was listening to a program on the CBC called IANDS, many years ago, about Buddhist monks hearing inner sound, and they devised a form of chant to try and reproduce it for their fellow Buddhists that were not hearing it. And they came up with this Gyoto monk, this kind of growling chant with harmonic overtones in it, to imitate something of that sound. Hildegard of Bingen's chant sounds like angels on another plane, another level. Mm-hmm. A lot of world music, he tries to imitate it. Constance Demby's music, I think, or you'll find certain electronic or classical composers, probably stray into those realms.
Now, you said that you had figured out how to do that multi-tone chant? I
do that, yes.
Would you like to give us an example?
I could. It'll sound like any sort of chant. It'll sound like, Nanu, Nanu, take me to your leader, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
Okay.
And I don't know how the phone line works, but we might get lucky, and there'll be some frequency response that comes through, wide enough to allow it to be heard. So it's 2 or 3 notes at the same time. About like that.
Wow.
Sounds a little bit like Popeye on acid,
No, it sounds much better than Popeye on acid.
Oh, well, that's good. That's good. Yeah, it's actually used in folk music in some traditions like tuba, you know, and China, Vietnam, and that part of the world.
We had some singers come to the American Folk Festival here in Bangor that did that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, musicians do that to get their voice kind of situated for singing. I've heard musicians do that before as a way to loosen up the voice, and I do that sometimes before doing a radio show as well. It clears out the vocal cords a bit. Good for radio.
Well, now you've done it. Now you've done it on the air. Is that a first?
Yes, and I hope people still like me and are not too scared. I
think it was very good, and I've heard the professionals, so I'm glad. I think you've mastered it.
Yeah, there's an album called "Hearing Solar Winds" by David Hikes and the Harmonic Choir, which is a whole choir of individuals doing overtone chant, and in a very sacred sort of way. It's sort of like Gregorian plain chant, only overtone. So that is like a choir of angels from another realm. That has to be some of the most ethereal chant that ever has been created.
You have a quote from Marjorie Kemp in The Mirror of Love. I heard a noise like wind blowing in my ears and knew it for the sound of the Holy Spirit, which became like the voice of a dove. When the Lord spoke to me, I lost all sense of time. I did not know if he was with me 5 or 6 hours or only 1. It was so holy and full of grace that I felt as if I had been in heaven, which she might very well have been. Yeah,
she's another one of those mystics. I think she was from the UK or England, and had, I remember seeing that book. I collect writings and ran across that passage one day, and I thought, Eureka, I found another one. It's everywhere, but especially the mystics, the mystical, contemplative type people that spend some time in silence. So through meditation, some people have actually strayed into those realms that the near-death writings have been describing. So for the mystics, when Life After Life by Raymond Moody was published back in the mid-'70s, I believe, that was a kind of, for us, kind of a legalization of spirituality or mysticism. It's like, more okay to talk about these kinds of things than it used to be. So I just describe it as the legalization of spirituality. It's like we don't have to, hold back quite so much. We can openly discuss visions of heavens and, out-of-body experiences. We're not necessarily insane, mad, crazy, etc.
Well, right, and it's a mystical experience that can happen to someone who is not even aware of the possibility or a practitioner of any particular method of meditating or whatever. It just happens as incidentally as a part of the death experience. And so many people come back confused by this. And in fact, this is one of the reasons IANDS exists, is to help people who have been startled and frightened and whatever by their NDE. But it really democratizes spiritual and mystical experience.
It seems to be very universal, the near-death experience or mystical experiences. If you put anyone in a cave and give them some meditation instructions, I would say a certain percentage will have some kind of experience. So it seems to be universal, like gravity. Gravity works for everyone, atheists, Buddhists, Christians. Gravity is there pulling, and
yes.
So it's like that. It's a universal truth or reality, and it's just potentially there for everyone.
And I can't count the number of times in the course of doing chaplain work that I've raised, a story about an NDE, usually for someone who has no particular religious background and is frightened about their disease or the possibility of dying. And then they will say, oh yeah, that reminds me of a story my mother told me, or an experience my dad had, or something that they themselves had seen, and they'd sort of suppressed it or never talked about the experience with anyone else because they weren't sure how to deal with it.
Yeah, our families all have these stories that are quite amazing. Some, ethereal person like appeared to someone, or they heard a voice or was given a warning, do not walk across this bridge, and then in the morning they discovered the bridge was like falling apart and they would have fallen into the water and maybe drowned. And, we all have these miraculous stories, but they're sort of kept within families and never shared with other people. And so we all think we're crazy and we all think we're the only ones to have had a certain experience when they are more common than we would believe if people shared, their secret stories with the world.
Mm-hmm. You also had a quote from Sufi mysticism: "Sound is vibrating in the whole creation. When you open your inner ear, you will hear a continuous sound which will lead you across all limitations of mind and matter. My beloved is speaking to you all the time. Alas, you do not hear his voice." I thought that was really, really beautiful as well.
He describes if you hear the sound, focus on the sound, it will take you beyond the confines of death, and that is a belief in the East that you can induce your own near-death experience through meditation, and that it's really a kind of dress rehearsal, if you will, and it's they call it death before dying. Meditation is kind of a practicing or warming up to the idea of passing on, only in a gradual sort of way, of course, through meditation. But yeah, kind of going to that same realm, only more gradually.
There was another quote I was going to. The person who is in tune with the universe becomes like a radio receiver through which the voice of the universe is transmitted. Hazrat Khan. I thought that was excellent, too, and certainly appropriate to this radio show.
Right,
that one.
I love using radio as an analogy for divine sound, and actually radio waves, the whole idea of spirituality or the existence of a supreme being or other dimensions, radio waves really work because they're invisible, but everyone believes that they're there. Everyone is under the impression that radio is real. And even though you can't see the radio waves, it serves as a great analogy that there are other energies flowing around us that are not necessarily apparent to the five senses, and yet there are ways to tune into them.
Well, it's a world of vibration. Whether string theory is true or not, we are all, in one form or another, it is, the creation is a vibration. So.
Yeah, it certainly is. More than we realize, it's just all vibrating in different ways. I like, the quantum physics and, science in general and astronomy, they really, I see the many parallels between the sciences and mysticism. So, like as the saying goes, as above, so below. There are a lot of parallels, I think, between the big and the small and the macro and the micro.
Now, when you get to the eighth heaven and there is no more vibration, apparently, because it's total silence, is that a level that preceded the creation, do you think? Yes,
yeah. The mystics have God beyond light and sound as being the source of creation, the first cause, to borrow a term, and then light and sound come into existence in different universes. So it's kind of like throwing a pebble in a pond and you get ripples that come out in all directions. And only in this case what we mean by ripples are dimensions or creations coming into existence. So it's God creating the cosmos, like the pebble sending waves on out, and we're in one of the waves, and there are many different heavens or planes, and just sort of at different degrees of nearness or farness, from the center where God is.
Right. Well, if we're a vibration ourselves, even, either in the body or out of the body, and we aspire to join God in the eighth heaven, we're probably aspiring to non-existence, because if there's no vibration there, then we aren't either.
Well, that's always a question, and in fact, if I run into someone on a master type figure, I hope to ask them about that, because they describe the silence beyond the sound in a different sort of way than just no sound, because we can all hear silence, without being enlightened or anything like that. So they seem to mean it differently, passing through levels of light and sound and soul travel or going within, but being affected by that experience. And so the silence on the other side seems to be different from just regular silence. And I'm not sure exactly what that means. That, we're all just part of God, so there is no I anymore. There is no me. There's only, the one. I'm not sure exactly, but I think it does have something to do with just sort of merging back into God and something like that. But yeah, I have a few questions myself about when you get beyond the sound.
There was a quote too that you included in this from the Nag Hammadi library. I am the silence that is incomprehensible. I am the voice whose sound is manifold, and the word whose appearance is multiple. I am the hearing which can be attained by everyone.
Yeah,
under perfect mind.
Yeah. Yes, that's it's potentially within everyone, and we'll just incarnate or reincarnate until we get around to that and take that journey.
Well, James, before we run out of time, perhaps you could tell folks how they could get a hold of this excellent article, this wonderful collection of quotes that you've put together.
Yes, my blog and article, The Yoga of Sound. They can email me, and I can send the link to them. I have it online at different blog sites, james@spiritualawakeningradio.com.
And how long did it take you to write this?
Well, actually, a couple of decades, because this research is based on research that's been ongoing for a long time, and so it started out as a few passages. Like the Richard Roll passage I noticed in the 1980s. I think Ronald Reagan was still in the White House, and I saw it quoted in a magazine published in South Africa called Science of the Soul. And I thought, okay, here's an Indian publication talking about a Christian mystic. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And so just over the years, I've noticed these passages, and then with this have just gotten around to making like one big article on the subject.
This is the level at which all religions come together, is the mystical. And unfortunately, the more mundane aspects of the different religions are always at each other's throats. But when you look at the mystics behind all of these traditions, they're one and the same in many respects.
Yeah, if the world religions are a circle, in the middle, is where the mystics kind of converge in the oneness in the center. Like the spokes of a wheel analogy. Yeah, that's where you get into the oneness. Whereas on the outer hub, you get separation.
Yes.
But I suppose even in their divisiveness, there is a kind of unity in that they all are the one and only true path with the one book. So in that sense, they're all alike too.
My thanks to James Bean for sharing his insightful understanding of the light and sound vibrations of creation. And thanks to all of you for listening. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern, at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying, once again, thanks for listening.